It's still just this is too.
I don't know if this is the. Oh, I just wondered. Okay. Just keep your mouth. Horrible. We're live. Okay, well, we are live. Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to our April 16th PAC meeting. I'm Julie Briskman, Vice Chair of Program Advisory Committee. I'd like to note we are starting the meeting at 4:12. Sorry, 4:42. 4:42 p.m. The meeting is being streamed live on MVTC's YouTube page. Unfortunately, Chair Palchik could not be with us today, so I'm stepping in to chair the meeting. Staff have confirmed that we have a quorum. We have Justine Underhill from the City of Falls Church, Sarah Bagley from the City of Alexandria. Have any alternatives here? DRPT Chief Deputy Director Alan
Yes.
is here. I also want to welcome NVT Staff Member Deputy Director of Programs and Policy, Amanda Sink. Hello. New staffers. Oh, welcome. Yeah. Okay. Amanda will be leading a variety of MVTC work, so we'll be seeing her regularly. Okay, welcome. We have several items to cover this afternoon, so let's get started. Item 2, the summary of the February 29th, 2026 Program Advisory Committee meeting. Do any committee members have any changes to the meeting summary?
That was in my email, right? Yeah.
Oh. No changes. Okay. Hearing none, the committee accepts the summary and no action is needed. Item number 3, Commuter Choice Program. Our next two agenda items are focused on the Commuter Choice Program. First, ATC Program Analyst Jason Adel and Commuter Choice Program Manager Daniel Nickelbein, who will present the I-66 Commuter Choice Staff Recommended Program of Projects. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice. My name is Jason. Thanks, Anne. I'm program analyst here at MVTC. I work closely with Daniel on all things commuter choice, and I'm very excited to be introducing this year's I-66 Commuter Choice Fiscal Year 2027-28 Draft Program Projects. All right, so let's go to the next slide. As a refresher, the call for projects closed in December. We received 16 applications totaling $69.8 million in funding. One application was deemed did not have strong enough nexus to the I-66 corridor. That was the Fairfax County Route 4 project. Another application, which was VRE's Broad Run lead track, was referred to DRPT's outside the Beltway program for full funding. With that, we now have 14 projects remaining, requesting about $60.5 million in funding. All remaining applications were scored using the approved scoring methodology shown here on the slide. The metric is our technical merit score, is person throughput, which is the measure of how efficiently a project moves people through the corridor. The technical merit criteria also looks at travel time savings, connection to transportation modes, whether project origins or destinations are in MWCOG's travel activity centers or equity emphasis areas, and the project's impact on version mitigation. We're also looking at project's cost effectiveness, which is measured by dividing the annual funding request by the technical merit score. And we also give up to 5 additional points based on if a grantee assigns it as their top priority. We now have the first of 2 slides showing our 14 projects for this round. The scores from this round are shown on the right-hand table. For this cycle, we've got a range of a high of 88 to a low of 45 for the scores. The staff recommended program of projects does include all 14 eligible applications. 3 were awarded to Loudoun County, 3 were awarded to OmniRide, 2 were awarded to Arlington County, 1 shown here and 1 shown on the next slide. 4 were awarded to Fairfax County and 2 were awarded to WMATA. The proposed total funding amount adds us to $60,492,945. This is the largest amount of your choice funding awarded in a single program project since the program's inception. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Daniel, who's going to talk about the public comment period for this round and the next steps for the call projects.
Yes, thank you, Jason. So we ran a public comment period from March 4th to April 3rd. We received nearly 500 submissions via an online survey, email, and comments made at the virtual public hearing. We did have all public comment materials available in both English and Spanish. Our partner jurisdictions were very helpful during this process, helping us amplify engagement during the public comment period via social media and newsletter and email messaging. We did have the highest amount of public engagement in terms of number of comments submitted in the history of the I-66 program. Most comments that we did receive were supportive of both individual projects and the program as a whole. And the full set of comments, if you'd like to read them, are found in the agenda packet for today's meeting and will be shared with the Commission in May. So this is our staff recommended program of projects by the numbers. As Jason mentioned, 60.5 million in funding to 14 projects. Prior to approval of the program of projects, we run an analysis to estimate benefits that the projects are expected to bring to the Northern Virginia region. These are things like reduced greenhouse gas emission, lower fuel costs, travel time saved. We do estimate that upon full implementation, this year's I-66 project will result in nearly 6,500 weekday project trips, which we anticipate will save Northern Virginia commuters nearly $3 million in fuel expenditures and 128,000 hours of travel time annually. We see these projects as helping people save time and money, providing new and diverse transportation options, all while helping to reduce congestion during peak periods on I-66. Next slide. Few upcoming key dates. Next month, we will brief the Commission and seek their approval to transmit the full program of projects to the CTB. In May, our Executive Director will present to the CTB with both an overview of this year's program projects as well as a bigger picture look at the program and the benefits it brings to Northern Virginia. The CTB will approve the FY 27 to 32 six-year improvement program in June. Funding for new projects becomes available on July 1. With that, Jason and I are happy to take any questions.
I have kind of a novice question, but when did the program begin?
2016 was the signing of the MOA, and then we had our first program projects the following year.
Okay. Okay.
We are celebrating 10 years of commuter choice.
Nice.
I know.
Where's the pen?
We're working it. We're planning something. We're thinking a splash, TBD.
One more question, colleagues, if you don't mind, before I go to the rest of the committee. Do you think that the extraordinary response we've been getting is because people are getting more and more educated on what this commuter choice program is?
Yes, I also said we have a phenomenal comms team, and they just did honestly a tremendous job reaching people where they are online, primarily email, social media. We did some paid advertising on both Facebook and Instagram, and so we really were able to sort of target those ads directly to where a project was, in terms of project location. So yeah, they did a phenomenal job in helping us spread the word.
I can't wait to share the LAM projects with my colleagues. Do you guys have any questions?
I have a quick question. So I'm curious as to how these scores compared to previous years. I don't know if you have that off the top of your head, but was 45 the lowest scoring project of previous years that ended up getting funded, or has it changed significantly since then?
We always have a pretty wide band of projects, of scores. I would say the scores this year are probably average in terms of the sort of band from high to low. And so, yeah, with the availability to fund all 14 projects, we were able to do so.
Okay. So it's not like there's a cutoff, like, a project scores below 20, and so it's less likely to be recommended by NVTC staff.
No, there's no cutoff. We do, all the projects have to go through an eligibility review to ensure that they are providing benefits to toll payers. And so while a project or several projects may score lower than others, we still do see them as providing those benefits to toll payers and providing additional travel options.
Okay, so then basically, besides the ineligible project and then the other project, everything else ended up going through. And then 9 million left over would get wrapped up into the next year or next 2 years.
Correct. So any unprogrammed funding will carry over for the next call for project.
Great, thank you so much.
So the scoring is really more about the situation where we have more projects than we can fund.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, okay,
that's,
that's what it sounds like. Okay.
yeah, it's not
That's where that's informative.
Yeah, I mean, if a score did get us, I think
Yeah,
I know what you're getting at, which is like if a score was as low, it doesn't necessarily mean it's ineligible, it doesn't provide value. But in a universe where we have to make choices, that's what the score is helping us, is make choices.
I was gonna say, just to add in, I think one of the things that, and I think Daniel did a nice job, the applications that we're getting in, they're already at, like, the jurisdictions and transit systems have already self-selected ones that will fit well with this program. So you already get this sort of natural, smaller universe of projects. And truly the big screening is whether it's eligible and legal. And so that's, in some ways, it makes it a little bit easier. So there's not, even though you may have a score of 45, all of these projects, as Daniel said, have a value to moving folks through the corridor. And it's very rare we see projects that come in that it's like the jurisdictions have already done their homework.
okay.
The outreach, I think, that the staff do and the consulting team do in making sure that people spend their time on this application if it's a project that would do well in this program.
Gotcha.
And so in previous years, though, there has been rollover as well. Is that correct?
Unallocated funding?
Unallocated, yeah. And so how much was rollover from, I guess, 2 years ago?
I don't have that number. I'd have to.
That's totally fine. I don't expect you to have every number. I was just curious how it compares to the 9 million this year. But anyway, that's helpful.
Is this the first time that Metro's getting funding through Commuter Choice?
They got 2 awards in the last 395 cycle, but this is the first 66 awards.
I had a question just to brainstorm on, and I'm sure you guys already have, but one of the things I find challenging about environmentally related statistics is that they're hard to make real to the average person. And this is not a criticism. This is just how can we all think about this? I love seeing 7,600 metric tons of GHG. Is that a lot? What I was just going to throw out, I don't know this is the right answer, but the region has goals for reduction. Is there a way to communicate the percentage of regional goals this program cycle achieves? If the goal in any given year is to reduce by 10% of the year before, or the overall goal is to get to a certain point, can we express it relative to our regional goals? Can we express it relative to the transportation space emission goals? This helps us, reach 28% of our, 2030 goal. And then, or can we express it year over year, assuming it's getting better year over year? But I'm starting to see, in a good way, a lot of city staff and people who work on these kinds of projects, including environmental impact data. But I don't think it's something people understand gas mileage, you know what I mean? People understand even vehicle miles traveled, stuff like that. I don't know collectively as a society, we have a good gauge yet on what a number like this means. So if we can just think about, and I don't know if you can do that between now and the full body meeting, but just.
Yeah, and in previous reports, we've done things where we try to attribute it to things that people do know
Yeah.
better, but I like the idea of doing it more as a percentage of the region's goal. That's a great idea. So,
Yeah. I was recently at the COG CPC's 100th meeting, and they were able, in the context of that big special meeting, to show a lot of charts that sort of showed how some things happen very slowly and then all of a sudden take off. We started out with 600 EV chargers in the region, and now we have 7,000. But for the first few years, it was we were adding 12 and 50 and 40, and then all of a sudden we added 1,000. And so I think that could be kind of cool over time to see as mode shift happens. It might not feel like a lot, but you're building to an explosion, to a exponential. So.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to calculate time saved, but that's something that I think would resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree.
And this number is just for these 14 projects,
Yeah,
correct?
So it's right.
That's good, I think, to build on
Okay.
your, because like there's with all the other things that have been funded with all the transit. the
Over
road
10
funding,
years in
How can
particular.
you like, what does that number look like
Yeah.
exactly?
Mhm.
Because that's probably a pretty big number. You look at this, it might be a little small. People might not think it's important. We know it is, but bigger picture, this whole program, what has this program done for the
10
climate
years.
goals?
I'm sure you all.
Oh, yeah, we have lots
Yeah,
of
I'm
good
sure
data on
you're
that.
working on
Yep. But the storytelling is really important, so I appreciate those
100%.
comments.
And just for my colleagues' information, when we were doing the pre-agenda, I asked if the fuel costs were close to current prices.
Oh.
And they were like from what, a week ago? Yeah, so that's current. That's what the current. Okay, all right, great. Well, good discussion. Thank you very much. I look forward to May 7th. And hearing no additional comments, the next step would be the staff recommended endorsed program of projects to the commission meeting on May 7th without objection. That's great. So next we have an update on the I-66 needs assessment. In addition to Daniel, we will have Amy, rail and public transportation as this effort. NBTC. Welcome. Yes, we're back on time.
All right.
Excuse me, sorry. If we can jump to the next slide. So before Amy and I jump in, provide just a little bit of history and background on the commuter choice and DRPT outside the Beltway programs. Both programs invest toll revenues from I-66 inside and outside the Beltway into transit projects that move more people. So commuter choice began in 2016. We're celebrating 10 years. And it is governed by an MOA with the Commonwealth. So projects must benefit toll payers, which means they have to have a strong nexus to the I-66 corridor, be one of several project types as outlined in the MOA, and as projects must benefit those toll payers, funding for transit operations projects need to be during tolling hours. So across 6 prior I-66 commuter choice funding rounds, the program has primarily funded newer enhanced bus projects with additional funding for some smaller capital projects, as well as a few TDM efforts. Anything you want to add on outside the Beltway?
For outside the Beltway, so DRBT administers the I-66 outside the Beltway program. So similarly, those projects have to benefit the I-66 outside the Beltway toll payers. Because outside the Beltway has the general purpose lanes and also the express lanes that run all day, we're able to fund all day service. So that's kind of a contrast with the inside. And then our first round of funding, I believe, came in 2023, since the tolling lanes opened in 2022. And our agreement is governed by an MOA between Express Mobility Partners and the Commonwealth.
Thank you. So quick refresher on the needs assessment and why we are doing it. So the commuter choice program started 10 years ago. We want to do both a strategic look back and a strategic look ahead on where the program can go. The corridor, it's been a while since the I-66 corridor was last studied. Inside the Beltway was last studied in 2016, outside in 2020. We know there have been many changes, especially post-pandemic with travel patterns. And so we want to be able to capture that in an updated study. We did see some programming challenges during the pandemic, resulting in some funding cycles with less demand than funding availability. There was a lot of uncertainty with commuting patterns. So both programs did accumulate a balance of funding. So this needs assessment is allowing both MVTC and DRPT to work with our jurisdictions to ensure there is robust demand for funding both now and in the future. We are starting to see that funding come back and want to use the needs assessment to continue to build on that momentum. As mentioned, we did just program the largest amount of funding for the I-66 program, the largest request that we ever had. And then a quick reminder on what the study does include: an analysis of existing and future travel patterns, a review of existing plans and studies to identify planned projects, and a development of some financial scenarios to look at different ways that funding from both programs can be utilized to most effectively meet a mix of projects that we identify in that project list. Next slide. So this is our timeline. We were here in February talking through the travel data analysis and the project list. Today, we're going to talk through the financial scenarios and how some different scenarios could be applied to fund a mix of different project types. At the end, we also have a few questions for PAC members that we're looking for feedback on that we hope to use to inform the policy change recommendations and discussion that will be included in the final report. In May, we will brief our full commission on this study and seek commission adoption in July. This summer, we will start to look at potential implementation of some policy changes that we identify in the final report. I'd note that all major policy changes do come to the commission for their review and approval. We do have some time to refine these. The next I-66 commuter choice call for projects will be held in the fall of 2027. Next slide. You've seen this at at the February meeting, but it bears repeating. We did a review of existing plans and studies, met with jurisdictions, all with the goal of developing a really robust pipeline of projects that could be funded through either the I-66 commuter choice or I-66 outside the Beltway programs. That review included things like looking through transit strategic plans, capital improvement plans, regional studies to identify projects that could be a good fit for one or both funding programs. The project team also did develop a handful of transit projects for areas where we identified significant travel demand that did not have existing projects to meet that demand. So in total, we developed a list of 89 projects totaling nearly $17 billion with projects split across capital, operating, and mega project categories. And this is the basis for the funding demand that you'll see compared with funding available on the next slide. I will now turn it over to Amy.
Okay, thank you. So on this slide, you can see that this is a graph showing the total funding demand from the project list as compared with the amount of funding available for both capital and operating projects. So over the life of the MOAs, there's approximately $1 billion available to program for projects. However, this shows obviously the demand is the $16.8 billion category. So next slide.
Before the question, I have a question on the slide. Do you want to wait to the end? It's fine. I can.
Yeah, why don't we wait?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'll talk through the financial scenario analysis. We're going to look at this very high level. We're not looking at actual numbers and figures here, but the big picture goal of this analysis is to help us envision how these programs could look in the future and what types of projects could be funded. So wanting to explore how the different funding scenarios interact with the mix of projects identified in the project list, and which scenarios are best able to mix and match and kind of support both the capital and operating projects. So more clearly, the goals being to first identify the total funding available for both programs through the life of the MOAs, explore the different ways of allocating funding impacts, how much and when funding is available, examine how funding can be allocated between operating, small capital, large capital, and mega projects. And again, I'm understanding which financial scenario best meets that mix of projects. So next slide. So here is the financial modeling framework. So this allows us to pull levers for two different questions that impact the final outputs. The first question we looked at is how we manage the money. So looking at different financing options that impact how much funding is available and when. So the traditional pay-as-you-go method that we utilize, as well as including debt financing and a funding reserve for those larger mega capital projects or major capital projects. And then the second question being how we allocate the funding among those different project types. So again, whether they're transit operations or capital projects. Next slide. So again, looking briefly, we covered 5 scenarios in the so I'll talk through like what each was just trying to accomplish. Scenario 1 was our operating spending status quo. So this basically asks what happens if we keep the funding splits between capital and operating as they are now between both of our programs and don't employ any creative financing methods. And then scenario 2 is what happens if we maximize the amount of funding available for transit operations. For commuter choice, they have that 50% cap on operating through the course of their program. And then also for DRBT, typically we fund a lot of operations projects and transit service in our program. So we, assumed this 80% operating spend down for scenario 2. And then scenario 3, what happens if we look at issuing debt to help finance one or more major capital projects? Scenario 3, I believe, assumes issuance of multiple debt issuances over a period of time, whereas scenario 3A looks at issuing debt within the next few years, so a larger issuance of debt to fund maybe a more shovel-ready project in the near term. And then scenario 4 looks at creating a reserve fund with a funding set aside each cycle to pay for one or more large capital projects in the future. So next slide. So a few takeaways based on the financial scenario that we did, or the financial analysis that we did. Demand for funding greatly exceeds funding available for both programs. So I know we were talking about undersubscription, but the good news is we identified a lot of projects that are eligible for this program. So the other thing is that issuing debt would allow these programs to quickly fund one or more larger capital projects, but it will result in less overall funding through the program's lifespan just to pay back those debt costs. And then demand for transit operating funds remains strong for both programs. So if we do choose to fund those larger capital projects, that might place more of a burden on the operating side of things. Next slide. Okay, and so in addition to the financial analysis, we also examined potential policy changes that could be made to one or both programs, either to support the financial analysis or other aspects of our programs. So the main goal of this policy change analysis, what changes can be made to fund projects that best meet program goals, and then potentially help enable the implementation of one or more financial scenarios. So now I will pass it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. If we can jump to the next slide. So before we finish, we do have a few questions specific to the I-66 Commuter Choice Program that we are looking for PAC member feedback on. I will say from a staff perspective, we've seen the I-66 Commuter Choice Program provide some very valuable funding to jurisdictions and transit operators in two main areas. That's creating and enhancing service on local and commuter bus routes, especially those that connect key employment destinations in Arlington and Washington, D.C., and supporting those strategic investments in small and medium-sized capital projects like the Ballston West entrance project that is proposed for funding in this year's program of projects. Now, with that said, we'd like to get PAC members' thoughts on a few key policy questions, and we hope to use this discussion to inform how we approach potential policy changes in the future. So we are looking for PAC feedback on what does the Commuter Choice Program currently do well in providing funding to your jurisdiction, what could be tweaked to better support projects in your jurisdiction, while keeping in mind some of the constraints that we have with the MOA with the Commonwealth, and what mix of project types do you envision the program supporting in the future, both for your jurisdiction and corridor-wide. And I'm going to pause.
Commissioner Bagley, I think you had a question.
Oh, not to evade the policy questions being put to us, but to do that, I was just curious, what's the funding rationale between, like, just the boxes, they seem to get smaller, then all of a sudden they get bigger at the end? What's driving that?
Yes, so the funding is indexed back to 2026 dollars. So the value of money over time diminishes as we get further and further out. So the costs as identified in the project list are all in 2026 dollars. We needed sort of a like for like comparison.
Yeah.
So the value of money then decreases over time.
And then it
Then
goes
why
up
does it
again.
bounce back at the
So 7 years versus
Yes.
5 years at
Yeah.
the end.
So you looked at to 2057, which is when the commuter choice.
The last square is 2 extra.
So it has 2 extra.
Oh, so it's, okay, no, I mean, just look closer.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It's very small. I was like, I'm having a hard time.
I thought it was apples to apples, so that just explains that. Okay. Okay, sorry.
No, it's a great question.
It's
But I think maybe it's something to put a little asterisk by or something, because
I think we do have it in the report. but-
okay. Just on the slide, yeah, that jumped out at me. It's like, why is it gonna get better at the end? And then does this analysis also, I want to ask this in a way that isn't embarrassing. If we are effective at what we are trying to do over time, fewer people will be driving, paying in to this, to the toll, no?
No, that sounds great.
So, I mean, so far, okay, so but there's something, you see what I'm getting at here? So does this, like the funds here, I appreciate have been brought back to present, but are they also thinking about as we mode shift society?
Guaranteed funding.
We have guaranteed funding. Okay, that's the answer then. Okay. All right.
She's across from me, I'm sorry. I didn't mean, yeah.
How does the debt financing work? Is that something that NVTC would take on debt and you guys are able as a body to take on debt and you get a better interest rate? I don't even know.
We've not done it with this program.
Okay.
And in fact, when we investigated it when the program first started, bond counsel didn't understand this concept of tolls and the volatility, honestly, but it's now obviously matured long enough. And so the possibility of using it, there's probably a couple of different mechanics that can be done in terms of the issuing of debt. That's actually not something we've looked at, right, in detail, because it just hasn't been something that's come up. Toll revenues as a whole, the Commonwealth has used them to issue debt.
Oh.
Because, and so, or there's opportunity to be doing that moving forward. So, but obviously if we got to that place, there's a project for debt, there's a lot of conversations with bond counsel and all the mechanics of how that works. That I think we're probably in a better place than we were 10 years ago to even think it's feasible.
Okay.
I think if I can add,
Yeah.
From the state's point of view, there are two different revenue streams. I think we do need to remember that are in here. There's the NVTC revenue stream. There's a lot of these policy options looking at leveraging the NVTC revenue stream, but there's also the outside the beltway revenue stream that the DRPT manages. But some of those same principles apply because theoretically the Commonwealth could use the outside the beltway revenue stream to leverage debt just as NVTC
Yes.
could inside. So
Okay.
there, I want to remind the folks that there are two different revenue streams we're talking about here, and they each have different MOAs and different things, but our goal is to try to make sure that we're leveraging together strategically, which is why we wanted to do this study together, because there may be times and places for NVTC to do that, for us to do that, or maybe there's a consolidated way to do that. I'm not a bond counsel expert. I
Yeah,
think we can
yeah.
do that, but just laying it out there as two different streams and the priorities may slightly differ what the Commonwealth's priorities are and NVTC's priorities.
And I think Alan got that quite right. That's exactly why I wanted to do this joint, because there's definitely ways to leverage. And just even to go back to a simpler place, the reason there's two different revenue sources, inside the Beltway is told by VDOT. Outside the Beltway is actually told by a private entity. So there's literally just two different entities collecting the money. And so that is the basics of this. And inside the Beltway was started tolling in advance of outside the Beltway by about 5 years. So that honestly, the very basics of why there's two different programs, because they actually have money coming from different banks. I mean, so, because like the Express Mobility Partners is collecting the tolls outside the Beltway and VDOT collects the tolls inside the Beltway. I know, yeah. Users should not know the difference, but it does change. That's why DRPT, because a part of the outside the Beltway deal, there's VDOT, there's a whole bunch of different funding things that came out of that outside the Beltway deal. The inside the Beltway deal was literally between the Commonwealth and NVTC. There's no private players in that.
And so I guess for I guess we haven't explored bond financing for NVTC or for any of this. And so we don't necessarily know, like Falls Church takes on debt, the debt rate is generally a lot lower than what a mortgage payer for a house would pay. And so I'm guessing that NVTC would have a lower interest rate, but I guess we don't necessarily know. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, like would NVTC, and we just had our bond reading pre-meetings yesterday. Does NVTC do, well, you probably don't do it now because you're not issuing.
The only debt that we've got associated now was for VRE, but I kind of looked at Scott, he's sitting back there. I don't know if.
Yeah, no, we really don't know what our interest rate would be.
But honestly, part of the effort of this is saying, are there even things worth exploring in that space, right? So that's where these guys are talking about really big pictures, right? What even makes sense to use toll money? What makes sense to use inside versus outside, is Alan saying?
So, go ahead.
I have other questions. I don't want to cut off the conversation.
Okay, well, I was gonna kind of shift to something more basic because I'm kind of newish to the transportation commission, but to the first question, do both of those revenue streams, the inside and outside the Beltway revenue streams, both go to the commuter choice program? Okay,
Well,
That's not as easy.
okay.
they do end up in it though, don't they?
We get a part of outside the Beltway. That was a part of a
Okay,
deal,
okay.
but outside the Beltway is a program that DRPT administers. Our inside the Beltway does have, we got the MOA amended to get a little bit of money from outside the Beltway. And honestly, it's increased our ability to do some flexibility of
Okay.
running the entire corridor.
But
So,
like-
yeah,
But like all the programs we just funded in our last item.
those are all.
That's the inside the beltway.
That's
That's all
only
inside,
inside the
yeah.
Beltway. Okay,
We will-
okay, because I'm like, we weren't talking billions and
No,
billions.
no, no, and we don't,
Okay,
I mean,
now I'm tracking.
DRPT
Okay.
programs their money.
That's kind of confusing. We haven't really done a formal call for projects, like.
It just funds.
Because we kind of do it through our merit cycle.
But yours is also called commuter choice?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Just called
DRP outside the beltway, I-66 outside the beltway.
It's kind of a
Okay.
behind the scenes.
Okay. So I guess if we're talking about two different programs, if we're talking about issuing, potentially financing the DRPT programs with bond issuance,
Either one.
either one, okay,
It could
okay.
apply to either
Okay.
one. I think one of the clarifications I had, one that I was talking to Amy and some of our folks is this study, I think this presentation pulls together a lot of concepts, but I think if I'm correct, the concepts and the financial ideas and scenarios could apply to either one of the programs, which is really nice because we're all kind of looking at apples and apples. But there's just literally, I think, different entities who could potentially do debt. MVTC could potentially do debt with their pot of funding, and the Commonwealth could potentially do debt with the funding that goes to DRPT. But having this done together, it's kind of makes sense because we're trying to look at this thing holistically, and we've been spending a lot of time recently trying to understand as a new administration coming in, what are the needs of I-66 overall. This has been a really, really good introduction to what those needs are and kind of trying to
Okay.
look at that. What is the demand?
Not to mention our program, I-66 outside the beltway runs through 2065. I-66 inside the beltway is through 2057. So that's like another 6-8 year difference or whatever. So, I mean,
Yeah, that's gonna impact your ability. Yeah.
yeah.
Issue. So to the first bullet, so you guys are getting the guidance that you need. Does anybody have any comments on the first bullet about what commuter choice programs currently do well? I mean, I haven't had a criticism. I think the way you rate the applications and projects seems reasonable to me. And I think that there may be a time when we're getting enough applications that we'll have to decide whether we'll fund stuff at the 45 score or, you know, like when we do our grants in the county, we don't fund anything that's below 75 on the score, if that makes sense, like on the scorecard. So I don't know, do you guys have anything else for bullet one?
I'm a little bit too new. I'd have to talk to
Yeah, yeah,
staff
yeah.
about, you know, what, I do have feedback from staff for bullet 2, but for bullet 1, it seems things are running pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, agreed. I think you touched on this earlier. I think it has been doing a really good job in the communications department, you know, I think that's a strong element. And then what my observations are, it seems to be good last money in, you know what I mean? Like it encourages organizations to, you know, get something really close to the end so that, you know, or close to ready. So
Yeah.
like it's not very well put, but like, if I know there's a possibility, a very strong possibility that if I get my ducks 90% in a row, commuter choice will finish it off. It encourages localities, I think, to, you know, to do the work to get to that point. It's harder when you're like, I could do all this work, you know what I mean? And for staff and like put together a great project and then try to figure out where to fund it. So I think it creates an incentive for staff to put irons in the fire. So I think that's a good thing. I mean, you know, in terms of the menu of things we get to consider, you know, as policymakers. No,
This program of projects coming.
right,
July.
right. Yeah.
And it's less than a month between approval and the access to those funds. well, they obviously have to get this funding agreement signed.
Right.
You guys are pretty fast at getting those out.
But my impression is that the relationships with staff are strong enough that applications don't come in, that they don't get very deep in the process if the vibes
Yeah.
aren't there. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's valuable because if you're getting all the way through it, a month, 6 weeks later, you're getting your money, you know. That's a power creator, I think, for cities, for locality staff.
On bullet 2, I mean, I feel a little bit uncomfortable with just the 3 of us answering that question. Because we don't have Arlington here, we don't have Fairfax here. I mean, I can just say from my jurisdiction perspective, I'm happy to get any money because we have such an, seriously, like we have such an immature transit system, comparatively speaking. So I'm just psyched to, get what we got. I don't know if you guys have any comments along those lines. I think is the intention as we move forward, I'm sorry, this is intention as we move forward to get more feedback from kind of like the jurisdictions, like Fairfax and Arlington on this whole concept. Would that be at the big commission meeting? Would there be like a survey maybe? What do we?
Probably not a survey. We are gonna go to the commission in May with
Okay.
larger, big picture overview and discuss some of the policy considerations as well. Yeah.
I have a
Other
feeling
committee
that
members?
what I feel like is a constraint is coming out of the MOA and is not a part of the
Yeah,
process.
I think that would be my.
That's helpful to know.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we want to open up the MOA, but
Yeah.
the things that these guys are already looking at, like, what do we have the flexibility? What are the things that can be a bigger conversation? So
Actually, what would be helpful is, can I submit some comments after the fact? Okay, because I
Absolutely.
think it'd be
Yeah,
helpful if I could loop staff into some of this.
Did you just say you amended the MOA?
well, we have.
Yeah, okay, but the.
doesn't want
the
to.
strategy, there's a very important conversation about the strategy of opening up the MOA to the Commonwealth Transportation Board and other parties and having the timing aligned to make sense, sort of. But that said, it's important for us to know what are some elements of the MOA that you're feeling constrained. So please share.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, can I answer that by diving into the third bullet? Like, yeah.
I was just gonna go there.
I think what's interesting is today I had the benefit of, I was in another meeting where we got Commuter Connections briefing on their commuter survey that they do. I'm sure you guys have seen those results. And amusingly, the highest level of satisfaction, like by a landslide with any form of transit, do you know the answer? It's
No.
people who bike and ride bicycles and walk or have the highest level of satisfaction with their commute. But recognizing not everybody can do that, distance wise but so what I think is interesting here is sometimes the smaller dollar value, but connective, like we have a lot of existing infrastructure that could take, so it's that last mile infrastructure that I would love for us to maybe emphasize with jurisdictions, and I get into the MOA part of it.
That's eligible. We're currently funding trails along 66
Yeah.
Indiana Metro.
There was some project somewhere in my 4 years that sort of didn't qualify. And it might not have been this one. I just remember early in my tenure hearing about some project that for whatever reason, because it's bike ped related. But I think the lesson there a little bit is, yes, there are mega projects that redirect entire intersections and build more trains and whatever. But I think if we talked up with our, localities and our, funding partners and surveys, this idea that like, it would both bring that person a higher degree of satisfaction, you know what I mean? If they get to walk, safely and well, or they get to bike for 5 miles in a protected trail to the VRE station or to the,
As long as they
Ashburn.
shower at the end.
We can't have it all.
So access to transit is 100% eligible, and we have funded capital bike share, we have funded trails. The big thing is they need to have an access to different things, to transit, and so we do talk about access to a station, major train, you get whether you metro station or otherwise.
Yeah.
But the other thing is making sure there's a nexus to the corridor, which is more about, that's not the MOA, that's law.
Right, that's
Right, and so if you have a trail that's, 35 miles, I'm not saying that's happening, but it has to have a nexus to moving people on that corridor. So accessing Vienna Metro, which we've done a fair amount of stuff with Vienna Metro, accessing the Vienna Metro or supporting things, we help for a little while, starting bike share in the city of Falls Church, getting people over to East Falls Church Metro. We've done likewise, same sorts of things on 395 corridor. But I think that, and there's also then, anyway, so that's an eligibility thing.
Yeah.
Encouraging folks to apply for it is never a bad thing.
And then
They're, demonstrating they're moving people on that corridor to that transit station.
the other thing that I don't know is a law, is an MOA element, but funding of Fare Free Dash, is a game changer, and we will continue to. I mean, this is what
That's
happens,
true.
right?
When
Right.
we went fare free.
Yeah, and so we got funding help to do it, and then once it's there, taking it away, so it's great. I mean, in that way. So I'm curious, like, if have y'all looked back at like us, y'all, to say what would other jurisdictions need? Like, what was the reason why other jurisdictions won't try it? Is it because it was only for a declining amount over, I think
That was not this program.
That was not this
DRPT.
program.
It was at the DRPT program. We don't, yeah,
that was TRIP.
yeah, so that's, yeah.
But I think like that style of program, which is like, we'll let you do something that, you can't otherwise afford to do or match us on. But once it's in place, the proof is that, you are likely to retain it. And that's been such a massive win for us. And it would have been a hard sell,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, we've run a handful of fare buy down programs, OmniRide in Fairfax County in the past. I think the difficulty with some of those is we can't fund those indefinitely, and right, so the funding is in place and it's a 1-year program or a 2-year program, and then the fare, either the local jurisdiction is responsible for funding it or the fare reverts back to the higher price, and so those have been a bit of a challenge in that regard.
So the only thing I would say on, well, first of all, back in the presentation, the one question I had, and I'm sure you're doing that, is have you looked at other comparable commissions or agencies that have floated debt to accomplish projects? I mean, there's probably some others around the country that may be similar that have done it, but
Not yet, but that is a good.
yeah. And then to the third bullet, for Loudoun County, I mean, you were just talking about like the last mile. For me, I'm very, very concerned about not driving as in moving people to the metro, to the metro stations. That's something that I'm really concerned about, multimodal forms of transportation. The one thing that I think about a lot is cross-jurisdictional. So we have the big Rivanna development happening, which is right on the Fairfax County line. And so I wonder how we might do cross-jurisdictional efforts. And I don't know, I know COG really, if it's a cross-jurisdictional project, COG, it scores really high for COG. I don't know if we've had any of those here, but maybe that's a consideration, cross-jurisdictional projects.
I'm sure,
Yeah.
actually, when you bring up cross-jurisdictional, that is one of the programs we have in the TRIP program, is looking at cross-jurisdictional transit options. And actually, we're reviewing the TRIP program actually over, of course, the next couple of months. But just putting that out there, that's one more source of funding to leverage, potentially funding about something from MVTC, leveraging that with our TRIP program.
Okay.
Making sure that we can get that money out there, but that is one of the programs that is strictly eligible. Mike, that's accurate.
And more importantly, there's not the geographical constraint that it has to be along a 66 corridor or 395 corridor. Because remember, great projects out in Loudoun, the ones that Loudoun they're eligible for, are the ones you're bringing people that have a connection to the 66 corridor. But the TRIP program is
isn't
just
Rivanna right on 66? No, it's not.
On the toll road.
It's
on the toll
road. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
But thank you.
Darn. Okay.
TRIP. I'm sure your staff will TRIP. I just want to put that
Yeah,
out
they do.
there.
Oh, yeah,
Plug
they
out
do.
there.
They do. And then on the minor capital bus purchases, I just wrote electric. But I think we're also.
That's your decision.
Speaking of.
Madam Chair, but I have
what a
one-
segue. Well
I
done.
I have one question, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Just to wrap things up. So I was looking back at so this is you're going to present to the commission in May, and it says report adoption in July. So July. Is there going to be a recommendation about on the financial side? 'Cause you presented scenarios, is that action item, that adoption going to include any type of financial recommendation, or is that meant to inform just the work that the MVTC is doing and the work that DRPT is doing?
Yeah, it's really meant to provide sort of a menu of options in the future. So we're not looking at saying, the best recommended financial scenario is scenario 2 or scenario 3. We're not going to include that type of language in the final report. Really just talking about trade-offs. So both in terms of financial scenarios and policy considerations in the final report, we'll be touching on, you could pull this lever in this way, but what that might do is X, Y, Z. And so sort of what those benefits and trade-offs are of those.
Thank you.
If I can add that the intention behind the May presentation and then the July report adoption is we're actually hoping to get the draft full report to the commission in time for the June meeting, just so you have it for a while, acknowledging that it's a complicated subject.
Just one more, I just wanted to chime in on the third bullet for Falls Church. The thing, or the main thing from this list that we had been discussing would be some sort of BRT capital improvement. So that would be, we looked at the cost of having lanes issued specifically for the buses, and to paint them red was like extraordinarily expensive beyond what the city could cover. And so that would be potentially use of something that we'd like to see.
All right, so we will now work to our zero emissions bus working group. And program analyst to provide a brief update on zero emission buses in the region and MVT working group.
Thank you. And I realize we're a little past time, so Owen and I will be quick. So MVTC has been coordinating on zero emission bus topics at a staff level zero emission bus working group since 2022. And we're really coming to the pack today, both to provide an update on that work and a preview of what we're planning for the future, because we have some good things coming up over the next 2 years. And so before I go into more details on that, I'm going to turn it over to Owen, who will provide a high-level status update of what's happening across the U.S. zero emission bus world.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, so just to start with a very quick national update from the latest version of a study that has been shared with this committee before. Zero emission bus adoption continues to grow with about 8,100 buses, full-size buses nationwide, up roughly 16% year over year. And that growth is spreading beyond early adopter states, though it's still pretty uneven, with a handful of states accounting for a large portion of zero emission bus deployment, while regions like the broader Southeast are earlier in the adoption curve, and fleets are scaling here more gradually. And zero emission bus deployment remains heavily battery electric, though we are seeing strong growth in fuel cell buses for longer range uses. Next slide, please. And where this gets more complicated and where most of the work is happening right now is in implementation. The main constraints we're seeing are both procurement-based and operational. On the procurement side, there are a limited number of zero emission bus manufacturers domestically, long delivery timelines, and heavy reliance on competitive federal and state funding. And on the operational side, agencies are working through things like vehicle range, on-route charging, grid capacity, and the need for significant facility upgrades. So it's really not just a fleet replacement, but it's a broader system transition. And as a result, most agencies are not moving all at once. Instead, they're taking phased route-based approaches, matching vehicles to specific service types, maintaining mixed fleets, and scaling their fleets over time. And that's where coordination and technical assistance become very important, particularly in regions like ours, where multiple agencies are working through similar challenges, but at slightly different timelines. And so coordinated planning, joint procurement, and technical assistance can help our agencies manage costs and risk.
So when we look at the 5 agencies that operate within the MVTC district, 4 of them now have battery electric buses, and across those fleets, there are 36 battery electric buses in service, and coincidentally, also 36 on order. And so what I think we're at an interesting point right now in the adoption of battery electric buses, because we're beginning to have that local data and experience that we can leverage to better understand the appropriate next steps. So we're not just at the very beginning, we're kind of at this phase where people can share a lot of good knowledge and help move all of the fleets together. And so this is where MVTC can really play a role. So in 2024, we published our Northern Virginia Zero Emission Bus Strategic Plan, and that established the 6 strategies that are listed on the screen to support the region's transition to zero emission buses. And we've really advanced these strategies through our zero emission bus working group meetings, which are currently meeting quarterly. And then we also did an on-route charging feasibility study that was published last year in early 2025 with some free technical assistance we got from the federal government. And so now we're on to our next phase in our efforts. And this is through a contract that we have with AECOM, which was funded in part by a DRPT grant to provide technical assistance to our agencies. And it's with an eye toward regional coordination and learning. And so on the next slide, kind of the key points of what we're getting into now, which is that with this technical assistance contract, we'll be providing kind of expertise to this zero emission bus staff level working group. And so in 2026 and 2027, we'll have experts from our consulting firm who are able to kind of provide timely updates on key issues in the battery electric bus world to the zero emission bus working group. And we can kind of adjust based on what their interests are, so that that's always kind of a reason to attend the working group and to generate new conversations. But then beyond that, we also we're identifying, and we're kind of currently in this process right now, 3 more in-depth technical assistance studies. So more in-depth dives into potentially battery safety or hazard mitigation strategies or potential utility coordination strategies and lessons learned, but topics that the group have agreed kind of are important to them, and that then the consultants can go and have kind of one-on-one conversations with different jurisdictions, do research based on kind of the issues, come back together, help people out, and then also produce at the end a technical memo that can be helpful to maybe other agencies in our region or across the state who haven't yet gotten to that point where they have a friction point, but it could be helpful for them. And so this is really the first touch point here. In the future, we anticipate coming back to the PAC and the commission as these technical memos progress and we kind of get that work plan finalized and have takeaways to share. And of course, in the interim, we'll be working closely with the jurisdictions and agencies to make sure that this technical assistance is useful to them. You know, we're looking for a value add here for the jurisdictions. And then before I take questions, I do want to mention that our new Deputy Director, Amanda Sink, will be taking over the zero emission bus work from me. So in the future, you won't hear from me on this. You'll be hearing from her. But I've very much enjoyed giving these updates over the years. So happy to take any questions.
I'm curious, we just had to pivot in Alexandria. You're nodding like you're aware. Oh, okay. I mean, that was where the question was going. So we just had to pivot away from an electric bus order to clean diesel. And so I'm curious if like that's a trend concern that the working group is aware of. Ultimately, it led to a very heated work session. It was kind of because, well, it just did. And several of us, myself being one of them, had to be like, a bus is a better than like to not have a bus. It's, you know what I mean? And ultimately like, so we sort of got grilled by a few people who were like, I can't believe you would put a diesel bus on the road in the year of our Lord 2030. And I, you know, but I was like, I'll put a bus on the road in 2040, you know, if I have to not cut service, you know, and to grow service. And I said that in large part based on communications from this group. So keep them coming, you know, but I just wanted to flag that. It looks like you knew about it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, we reflect, like this group is to discuss the challenges. It's often it's talking about the challenges as much as, if not more than the, let's say, opportunities. And so I think it's having those frank discussions and being able to tell, you know, colleagues how maybe it was handled in one case or other people are approaching it. I think everyone's looking at this as you're still kind of testing it all out, seeing how it works on your routes and then having to deal with some of the challenges that Owen was discussing. You're putting in orders for battery electric buses and then waiting for years. So,
and to be clear, we weren't backing off electric. It was a mix of availability and cost.
Right.
So, you know, that's what led the change. Yeah.
We haven't been able to go as fast as we'd like.
Yeah.
So, you know, and there are other kind of innovative things that can also work. You know, I know some people have been looking at hybrid diesels in which you can kind of geofence when they turn on their electric, the electric portion of their engine. So if you're going through a corridor, that's maybe had pollution concerns in the past. You can try to be electric through that. So there are other things that are happening, that can also help.
If I may add also as well, but at the federal level is having an impact on what transit agencies are having to do. In the last low, no, and bus facilities program that the federal government did, I'm glad a lot of money came out, but there were, I think, no electric buses were funded at all, but a lot of hybrid buses were. So maintaining that funding coming from the federal government is great, but people's agencies have to pivot based on those funds coming and getting to your point. Buses are important, get them out there, we'll deal with what the schools are. But that's driving a lot of folks that do rely on those federal dollars coming in. They're being forced to pivot whether they want to or not. That's just the reality probably for the next couple of cycles of that program, which then trickles down to what the goals are of each agency.
Okay. Well, seeing no further questions, do we have other business? I don't think we do. Is there any other business before the pack or any final questions or comments by committee members? Okay, great. Our next meeting is scheduled for June 18th at 4:30 p.m. here at MBTC. There's a joint WMATA Committee and Legislative and Policy Committee meeting following this meeting at 6 o'clock. PAC members are invited to stay if they would like to participate. WMATA's Inspector General will be joining that meeting. Oh, okay. All right. With no further business, I will call this meeting